Okay, let's get resumed. The third panel, and this is actually an interesting panel, slightly different. First, I'm organizer of this whole conference at the symposium, and I invite all the panelists except for this panel. The first speaker, Mr. Stan Crow. We have made friends since we met recently. Now, when did we meet? It's a year ago or 6 months? Yeah. And then we found that we have a lot of the common interests, especially on Japan. So now Stan is a fellow of the SMU Tower Center. So he is interested in organizing a panel on the topic of the how to promote research and development. I found it interesting, and then also I share the spirit or argument that that was shown in the last panel. That is, business people are smarter than government people, or politicians at least. Maybe, but I can agree with with that this spirit. So I'd like to have I thought it was a good idea to have a panel that has business people. That's what Stan proposed. So I thought it was a great idea. So we have organized this third panel. So the first panelist is Stan Crow, as I said, my friend, and he was in the military, and then he was the last position was chief technology officer of Grumman, and then he moved to Dallas to retire, and he started his own consulting company, and then he found SMU Tower Center. It was very fortunate for us. And since then, we are working together, and then I have had a lot of fun time talking with Stan, a very stimulating person. So please join me for welcoming Mr. Stan Crow.
Well, thank you very much, Hiroki. Very much I have enjoyed, as part of my move to Dallas, getting to know you. And getting to know Jim and the SMU Tower Center. And yes, I agree. Many great conversations about the things that we've been hearing about today and last night, this era of uncertainty, and then what do we do about it from so many different angles. And the technology thread that I'll talk about sort of emerged from some of those conversations. But first, also, let me say thank you, Hiroki. Thank you, Jim, and the organizers from SMU for adding this panel in, and our hosts at KO. And thank you to all of you for coming. Now that the sun's finally come out, I think it might have been a tough choice if you were going to get here on a rainy day, but now you have something else to do. You could go to the park or something on a Saturday afternoon. But thank you for being here, and hopefully this will be somewhat interesting. Where I wanted to start off with this discussion of R&D innovation is to continue the examination of some of the elements of uncertainty that we've taken in the other panels. We talked about, of course, geopolitical uncertainty, divisions in the U.S. We've talked about climate as drivers of uncertainty, and we've looked at those from a policy lens and from a business lens, and to a degree. So what we're going to add in this panel is we'll add a technology lens and also some things about investment. So another aspect of business, and how do those contribute to this thinking about uncertainty, and how do we then achieve some of the objectives of national security and economic growth. So let me start with a fun place, which is rockets, and even more fun, rockets blowing up. And I'll talk about why I chose these two examples to kind of frame this discussion that are set almost exactly 30 years apart. On the left, we had the launch of the Titan IV on the 2nd of August, 1993. It was carrying a spy satellite. And about 100 seconds after liftoff, you see in the close-up photograph there on the far left, how some of flames start to come out of the side of the rocket. And shortly after it's detonated, $2 billion loss of the rocket and the spy satellite. Obviously, that's a problem. But other things compounded the problem in that case, because this was, you may recall, this was an era after we'd had the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion. And so the Titan IV, as a heavy lift rocket, was one of our only ways to get large payloads into space. Furthermore, there had been a long history of problems on this program, and staff changes and different things like that, such that the new workforce that was working on this rocket in the pre-launch had done some things where they had actually detected the anomaly that was then later going to lead to the loss of the rocket, but they weren't experienced enough personally to have known what that meant. And so it launched anyway, and with the catastrophic results. Compare that on the right, we have SpaceX launching the Starship earlier this year. Again, very heavy launch rocket. It goes up a couple of minutes off after launch, some things go wrong and it's destroyed. Very expensive. Some other things were riding on it, like in terms of expectations, similar to Titan IV, where NASA is counting on Starship to be one of the key means to get us to the moon. And much of the space economy is looking at the importance of this. However, the reactions of the two are very different. And so I want to explore a little bit about what's different about it and why are they different. So, both of these are kind of in eras, you'd say, of uncertainty. We were coming out of the Cold War in 1993, where now we've heard people talk about, are we coming into, what do we call this? Cold War II? I don't know what it is, but this new era of something. And yet also a common element in both is that technical risk remains. So this is hard. Things can blow up. Things can be challenging to do. However, some of the differences are that now what do we see is that the investment and the attitude towards space and the moving forward with R&D is not diminishing. In 1993, the loss of the Titan IV was arguably one of a series of key events that led to a plateauing or a flattening in progress in space for a decade and a half, at least. Lockheed was never able to get the reliability challenges solved with this rocket. They had several more losses after this. Eventually, the government sort of directed the merger of Lockheed and Boeing space capabilities into the United Launch Alliance, and we shifted to a new program, the Evolved Expendable Launch Vehicle program. But there was just basically this flattening of the expectations for what we were going to do in space. Today, with Starship, we don't see any of that. The spaceship was lost, but Elon is saying we're going to launch again in maybe August. Investment remains high, momentum remains high, and it's viewed as a learning opportunity, an experiment from which data was collected, which will now lead to future success. So, all right, why does that happen? Why is that different? There's some key features about this. SpaceX, of course, has done what they've done with a combination of public and private funding. They have a culture of driving out risk. So unlike the Titan program, the predecessor to the Starship, the Falcon 9, is now the most reliable rocket ever in the world, approaching 200 consecutive successful launches, doubling the number of successful launches of any other platform. And as I said, now the investment remains strong. So what I want to do is take this theme of resiliency. How are we seeing resiliency in the uncertainty now, and explore what makes that up? Ambassador Suzuki, I like the fact that you were highlighting the theme of resiliency that some of the others had mentioned in other parts of the session today. I think that's really important. And in this case, we have a number of elements that contribute to that. So we'll talk a little bit about the innovation landscape and why are we more resilient from this technical risk today. So if we start with a look at the types of research and development and where the boundaries are between traditional government domains and what maybe historically traditional domains of private investment, we might say that historically in the 90s, areas of space, defense, large energy projects were in many cases areas where government policy, government leadership, and government created programs were really what was propelling the investment and propelling the research and development, whereas private investment would largely be in commercial domains. We see changes now where that is breaking in a new direction. We see the sources of funding. You can see the chart from McKinsey there over to the right, showing the increased amount of private funding and private capital going into the space sector. Still a tremendous amount of government investment, but that huge increase in the private investment leads to other sources of funding and therefore other mindsets and other approaches and other ways to respond to these problems and challenges. We also have a difference in the kinds of technology that are now contributing to these core areas. So we had the increased diversification and proliferation of software, microelectronics, digitization. We've talked about artificial intelligence, and also advanced manufacturing techniques. We hear a lot about 3D printing. There are other sorts of important advanced manufacturing techniques, full-size determinate assembly, modular production, and of course, automation. These allow companies to more effectively not only design, but then to produce components. So the result of that is, I call it the funding to problem ratio is shifting. So what I mean by that is the problems are still hard. Getting into space is hard. It takes a lot of money, but it takes less because there are more opportunities to do some of these activities more efficiently, and the funding is increasing. So as the problems become disaggregated to an extent and the funding available increases, that ratio shifts. And that means that more private capital can come to bear against some of these problems that traditionally have been exclusively the domain of government funding and government-led programs. Secondly, we talked a lot about globalization or supply chains and the benefits of both having markets and having suppliers from multiple locations in different countries. That also changes the dynamics for return on investment, because as not only the advanced technologies and the advanced manufacturing capabilities, the ability to bring in partners to these projects shifts the dynamic and allows there to be more private investment. So if I try to distill this into a series of sort of the success factors, I'll name 4. These are ones that we see playing out in a number of different areas. And really, all of these contribute to increasing the clarity and the predictability of outcomes. Although there's always sort of irreducible risk, technical risk, and the other ones we described, nonetheless, there are other things that can inhibit investment that if we can find ways to alter these parts of the equation, the irreducible risk remains, but the other types of reducible risk can be addressed somewhat. And so I'll talk about several of these. Private actors and investors are looking at these to really determine, does this make good investment sense? What's the likelihood of a positive return on investment, whether I'm a private funder or whether I am a board of a company that's trying to decide whether to go forward with a project? So the first I'll talk about is resiliency of funding. And what I mean by that is not only availability, but visibility of funding sources. We heard earlier today discussion. I liked, Jason, when you made the comment about your thesis and the number of players and the speed of information that you saw in the world today. And I think that is really important, because the more information there is available, the more decisions that can be made, the more these independent decisions can be made to allow investment, the more productively capital can be allocated. And so sorry, I had another note. Yes. Mori Sensei had cited the importance of the priorities and said that there's more work to be done in Japan's defense priorities, that they were good, but now we need to get to the next level of visibility of what those mean. And so that is really my point around funding resiliency. It's the visibility of the structures underneath the high level priorities that allow people to see the programs and the budgets that will be there in order to build on investment decisions that are made in the near term. Second one I'll talk about is open architectures. So this is back to that idea of reducing or disaggregating the amount of complexity or the amount of funding required to reach a certain threshold to make a difference. This is about breaking a problem down into modules, into different parts. With an open architecture, one person, one investor, one element of the supply chain can build the engines, another can build some software, another can build a sensor. Or you can have different components and that work together and that can interoperate through transfers of data and still add up to a capability. So by having an open architecture, there's an opportunity to divide the problem into more parts and therefore to address each of those parts through private investment. Partnerships. This is about sharing that risk and expanding the opportunity. Certainly there are industrial partnerships and there are international partnerships. These do require, as we've been talking about in the supply discussion, aligned values, aligned interests at least, and some common ability to understand what the outcomes are likely to be so that there's a shared basis of that partnership. The final one I'll mention is incremental steps. So traditionally in large programs like defense acquisition, we talk about the valley of death. And there's this period between an initial prototyping effort in a program and then a decision to go forward with a major production. Classically, a number of activities have been produced, have been put in place to try to cross that valley of death. Turns out the problem is more complicated than we often thought about it. And the new Department of Defense Science and Technology strategy that's just come out now identifies 3 valleys of death, as if one weren't enough. So they've added 2 other places in the typical development process where good ideas and programs will be developing momentum and then they will stop because of an inability to get over that next threshold. So incremental steps is really about building a number of different on-ramps, different opportunities to make successive progress. Certainly we see that with SpaceX, and that was their development of the Falcon rocket series as they incrementally developed the maturity of that rocket and then made it more and more successful to now eventually add up to the big step of maybe moving on to Starship. So this really is about at-bats. How do we get more at-bats in order to make progress? Now move on to some specific recommendations, taking those sort of characteristics in mind, the dynamics in the market, some of the lessons that we've seen in other development projects and how the market is shifting. What should we do to do more of this in order to have more innovation, more partnership, and more growth for economic security, for national security and economic development? I'll start with the visible programmatics linked to the policy priorities. So we start with the ones that are visible, Japan's recent 3 documents, the US Department of Defense S&T strategy. These are good. Jason, you'd mentioned the importance of moving from strategy to action. Well, this is really that in this arena. Having the steps clearly visible so that investors can see them and understand the linkage to whatever problem it is they're trying to address and what those programs and what those budgets are likely to be that will allow them an opportunity to get a return. This helps them to gauge timelines and also helps investors to know whom to engage. On innovation-friendly principles, policies, and standards, so I mentioned open architectures. This also is about contracting mechanisms that allow people who are not familiar with, for example, normal defense contracting, to be able to have a way to engage this somewhat arcane system. In the US, we have the Defense Innovation University, DIU. AFWorks and SpaceWorks are 2 other elements of the Defense Department that are engaging the traditional private sector in order to allow on-ramps. Space Force has recently created something called the Front Door Office to allow this to allow investors and innovators who are not familiar with this background to be able to bring ideas to bear to solve government problems. And then creating this engagement among the government and industry and investors. This is really about having an opportunity and an environment where discussions can happen. This is again about resilience. It's about the free flow of information so that decisions can be made about where to invest and where a likely return is going to come from. DoD is starting to advance this. We'll see where this goes, but with the Office of Strategic Capital that was recently formed, a number of innovations to try to engage the venture capital community to talk about things that are needed in ways that can lead to more deployment of private capital in ways that will further investment. Number 4, selectively addressing partnering blockers, and I'll particularly call out items like security and export rules. Very, very important, particularly when we're dealing with international collaboration. Here, I'll sort of take a position a little bit different from some of the, maybe current thinking in the U.S. government, which is calling for sort of systemic and holistic reform or alignment of security systems, for example, in order to have partnering on certain projects, or export reform wholesale, ITAR, things like this that are often mentioned. I think it's worth discussing really what's the most pragmatic way to do that. I tend to be one that favors pilot projects and ways to move forward in smaller, manageable steps. I think it's ideal if whole country systems can reform and align, but that can also be somewhat challenging. So however that happens, whether it's done holistically or sort of in an incremental and pilot-based approach, the way to then begin getting real movement is in what I call catalyst projects. Put projects together that are not about picking winners, not about selecting a certain company to go do a certain thing and handing a contract to them, but bringing together the key stakeholders, those who are the government users, policymakers who can help to clear roadblocks, innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors, and put them in a framework, in an environment where they can talk about an outcome and an objective in such a way that they can find solutions. This can be done in certain areas. We've already got some in defense, space arena, energy. These are all areas that are probably ripe for this sort of a catalyst project approach. Well, so if we do this, can it work? I'll close with this example, another space example, which I very much enjoy. When I was in the Air Force, I had an opportunity to work at Space Systems Command, starting an office that was called the Hosted Payloads Office. And the idea was to find ways to again reduce barriers to entry for smaller projects and lower the cost and lower the degree of difficulty of accessing space by finding essentially ride shares, opportunity where there was going to be a satellite that was going to be going up anyway that would have extra capacity, and then host or let another payload sit on top of that. I think a very exciting example of that we're seeing just today, which is the QZSS satellite from Japan and Space Force's situational space situational awareness payload, which will be flying on that and developed by MIT Lincoln Labs. This is a really interesting opportunity where the QZSS satellite that Japan is launching, the series of these, will be for positioning of information on Earth, to locate kind of like a GPS, but much more accurately. And so it's going to have sensors on that satellite that will be looking down and communicating. Meanwhile, the hosted payload from MIT Lincoln Labs will sit on the top of the satellite using sort of extra real estate, and it will look up. It will look up to the geosynchronous belt, and help to look for things like debris and monitor what's happening in the belt for that space situational awareness for control purposes. So I had an opportunity to talk with General Raymond last month, who recently retired as the chief of Space Force. And he was describing this program as what he thought was the leading example of partnership between countries. and that it saved the United States Space Force $1 billion by being able to put these sensors onto the QZSS satellite. So the initial payload's been delivered to Japan. They arrived in country mid-May. And this piece of critical space infrastructure will be launching, and it will contribute both to national security and to economic development through what this is going to enable for both countries. So part of the new model, it shows some of those incremental steps and the way to open up access to what traditionally would have been a very large and expensive process of getting those sensors up into space. So I'll stop there and look forward to any questions or further discussion.
The second speaker is Mr. Daiki Amaki. We met yesterday, so I do not have anything to add to his bio, which is on the program. Amaki-san, your stage.
Hello, my name is Daiki Amaki, and head of aerospace office in Development Bank of Japan. And thank you very much for inviting me for this opportunity. I appreciate for SMU Tower Center and KGRI for hosting this wonderful event. Yeah, as Takeo Sensei mentioned, I'm pretty honored to invited this event. I met Stan-san in a conference where I introduced my activities to develop space industry in Japan. And we catched up, and he sent me an email. Hey, Daiki-san, how about joining in June conference? And okay, and I see, okay, who would be a participant? And I saw that, many professionals from military sectors, Stan-san from Northrop Grumman, Mr. Tom Rai from BAE Systems, Tsuchiya Sensei is a national security professional. So I said, oh, wow, I cover mainly commercial sectors. So how can I contribute to this discussion? So Stan-san mentions, no worry. We discussed about, economic collaboration between US and Japan. And Tsuchiya Sensei sent me homework that, okay, Daiki-san, how about addressing two questions? So how how commercial sectors can contribute to increasing demands from military sectors? And what's your private comments? What's your recommendations for military sectors from commercial sector standing point of view? So today, I hope to cover 3 points. So firstly, I hope to introduce my own coverage, and secondly, I hope to introduce how some examples how I believe can contribute. Commercial sectors can contribute to military sectors, and then my personal comments of potential contribution from commercial side to military. But this discussion would be overlapping between commercial and military. But I have found from today's previous two panels that this is not just a discussions of military and commercial. I have found those are just examples of how Japanese can collaborate into the global supply chain. How Japanese commercial sectors can be a great partner in the global supply chain. So today, I hope to raise some examples, and later I hope to discuss. So the first part, self-introduction. My bank, Development Bank of Japan. By the way, of course, today's comment is just personal, not reflecting my institutions, but I work for Development Bank of Japan, for 100% owned by the Japanese government, Ministry of Finance. Total asset is 170 billion USD. The staff employees are about 1,300 employees. Our coverage is across the whole nations of Japan and also globally, New York, sorry, not in Texas, New York. But actually, you know, we discussed to open the second office in California or in Texas. So hopefully in the second office in Texas, and London, Singapore, and China. As a state-owned development bank, our mission is to support development of the industry and the society by supporting individual companies and projects. The next slide. Next one, please. Yeah. And activities. So debt, we provide debt financing, equity investment, advisory services, and asset management services. And especially DBJ is increasing equity investment because Japanese industry requires more risk capital. And we can, DBJ is not a bank because we don't receive any deposit. So we can invest, we can provide a larger portion of investment of equity. So we are providing equity investment as a risk capital of the industry. Some examples. Yeah, my coverage, I cover mainly those 4 sectors: commercial aviation sectors, supporting MHI, IHI, KHI, or some suppliers, AirEdge, the tier 1 suppliers to Safran or SkyDrive. Space business, we invested in iSpace, lunar exploration company, or Space One, small size rocket launchers. Airbus Ventures, we are LP investor of Airbus corporate venture. I cover shipbuilding and marine equipment segments. So Japan Marine United is the 2nd largest shipbuilders in Japan. Wärtsilä is in North Europe, integrated marine equipment providers. Machine tools, Okamoto or Ebara, I cover those manufacturing sites. Next slide, please. And this is how my team evolves over the last few decades. So our team started from 1980s, from supporting engine programs, V2500 engine development program. This was a signatory program for Japanese engine manufacturers. And we provided big debt to support for that program. After that, some air fleet, you know, or air flights, such as development of B767, B777, B787. And in 2010s, you know, or for instance, PW1100G, PW1100Z, which is a pretty well sold engine. Some Japanese manufacturers, KHI, MHI, IHI, joined this program. DBJ supported them by joining sub-risk revenue shared partnership program. And then from 2017, we started investment in startup companies, investing in startup companies in space, such as iSpace or Space One or Airbus Ventures. So those are the basic brief introduction, and how my comment about how commercial sectors can contribute to military sectors. My idea is 3 points. So firstly, Japanese commercial sectors can be reliable supply source in global supply chain. Semiconductors are pretty well-known examples, but today from my own sectors, I hope to introduce one example. This is from commercial aviation program. One Japanese company in Okayama provides manufacturers very special component for aviation. That's a forging company. They manufactures, for instance, landing gear component. They produce shift connecting tires to the main body, or turbine discs made of titan alloy or nickel alloys. Those equipment are pretty difficult to produce because, you know, those components need to accept high pressure. So for instance, landing gear, once the airplane lands, the shift needs to survive. That's a heavy pressure. Turbine disc, you know, it needs to survive the high pressure of engine combustion in the turbines. So it requires, you know, high technical know-hows to understand materials, to what temperatures, with what temperatures, you know, or you would heat with those original materials, how many seconds, and it requires a huge pressing machines. The Japanese companies has 50,000 tons of pressing machine. So that's a huge, it's a third or fourth floor building tall. And you know, how many seconds with what temperatures, those professional, very special know-hows makes only a few limited companies to be able to produce that component. And Russia, originally, Russia named VSMPO provides 70% of the total production of the global market. And other players, Japanese companies, USA companies, France, and 2 other Chinas. But after the Russian invasions, the global supply chain tried to shift from that Russian source. Airbus acquires that French company, and Boeing needs some assistance to get reliable source. So they approached to the Japanese company, and Japanese companies now is trying to develop the facility with CAPES. So my team supports the team for that investment. Now, you know, this is just one example how the Japanese commercial sector can be a reliable supply source. The second point, technological advancement. Some technological R&D could be applied both for commercial and military use. So another example coming from marine sectors, Japan is leading autonomous shipping initiatives. So autonomous shipping for labor saving operation is a big theme in marine sectors. Actually, in marine sectors, long time, we have 2 themes. One is autonomous shipping, the other next generation fuel, or hydrogen or ammonia. So this is the other pretty important theme. And Japan is leading in this topic. Japan has an open innovation consortium of 3 companies named Meguri 2040. And Meguri 2040 made the successful autonomous voyage in 2020 already. And this was a wonderful project. You know, you can see a big container, not just a small ferry. It's a 100-meter, 800-ton container, and for 3 days from Tokyo to Matsuzaka, 800 kilometers, the ship makes the fully autonomous voyage. This was remarkable, especially by making the pretty fully autonomous shipping in the very busy sea areas. Even in Malacca, Singapore Straits, one day number of sailing in a day, even in Singapore Straits, it's 400, while in Tokyo Bay Area, more than 500 in a day. But even in those digested area, the Japanese consortium Meguri made a fully autonomous shipping. So this was wonderful, and Japan is leading that initiative. Three components were developed in this project, 3 parts. So maybe in the footnote, sorry, you cannot see, or can you scroll down a little bit? Yeah, sorry, very small. So onboard autonomous functions, remote ship handling functions on land, and telecommunication system between onshore and on ships. Some technologies are applicable to military use as well. So for instance, sensoring can be useful for autonomous underwater vehicle AUV, or communication system between the space and the marine can be applicable to maritime domain awareness, or VHF data exchange system with the next generation information system between the marine and the space. So those technical advancements can be applicable for military use as well. This is the second point. The thirdly, commercial sectors are very good at cost-cutting inventions linked to better size, weight, power, and cost of military products as well. Some examples, Cesium Astro. Actually, this is a Texas-based company in Austin. Yeah, and it's one of DBJ's indirect portfolio company. It develops high throughput software-defined phased array communications payloads. So simply saying, it develops a new generation of antenna and making great communication between space and on Earth. You need better antenna. And these days, those communications, in the near future, those communications will be made between on land and very low Earth orbit satellites, because the more lower in the orbit, low latency and high coverage of images. So low, we call it LEO, low Earth orbit constellations. But in order to realize that LEO constellations communications, this phased array software-defined new antenna would be required. Right now, military uses that technology already, but it's pretty expensive. So for instance, for one satellite, around 10 million USD, 10 to 20 million USD would be required. For LEO constellations, for instance, 300 satellites would be needed. Then the total cost just for antenna, more than 3 billion USD. While Cesium, the cost will be just from 1 to 2 million USD. The cost for 300 constellations, the total cost will be dropped to 300 million USD, for instance. And with that dramatically reduced cost, commercial application to autonomous vehicle, level 4 autonomous driving could be applicable. So now DBJ is helping Cesium Astro to partner with Japanese car OEMs to realize level 4 autonomous driving, for instance. Space One, another example. So, SpaceX is very famous for achieving very cheap rocket launching system. It's true. Meanwhile, Falcon 9, it's a type of rocket made by SpaceX. The size is a huge 22 tons of payload, while Space One, their rocket is much smaller, just 100 kilograms. So the cost would be, of course, much smaller. The table price for one launching of SpaceX would be 67 million USD based on the SpaceX homepage, while Space One around 10 million USD for one launching. So cost could be dramatically reduced. So this cost cutting inventions is the third potential contributions, I believe. So going back to the next slide, implications for military contractors. Next one. I believe, as I explained, I believe commercial sectors can contribute. Well, how can we, or how can we make the best use of that commercial sectors? My idea is to enhance the dual use sector. So that means, military sectors could utilize technologies of Japanese commercial sectors or collaborations in R&D activities for technology applicable to both sectors. That's one idea. But it's pretty, natural and, no doubt. But why, Daiki-san, why are you mentioning about that pretty obvious idea? It's because this is not the case currently. We have totally different value chains in military sectors and commercial sectors. Military sectors, they have very strict rule of applications. They like to apply only for military uses for security reasons. Commercial sectors in Japan as well, they have strong hesitance. They are strongly hesitant for their products to be used for military purposes. But right now we understand both sectors are increasing. So maybe, we could find common areas for R&D, for example. The second point, military contractors could reap benefits in the long run if they develop a diversified source supply chain with long-term strategic perspective. What does it mean? Well, enhancing supply chain needs capex by suppliers. Some challenges exist for that. That means some suppliers don't want to make capex because of two reasons. Volume of business, meaningful volume business is important in decide capex. And also suppliers, financiers, investors like me need steady business, not highly volatile. Actually, this is the case currently. So I hear from my clients, for instance, shipbuilders, that military orders, that's a pretty volatile, bumpy orders, and it's pretty competitive. The shipbuilders cannot make sure the position in the business. So, and also the volume is very small. So for instance, air flights, commercial aviation, or even, or smaller orders, more than 10, around 10. So in a year, more than 100 orders, while in military use, just one digit orders. So the volume is small, and suddenly big orders, sometimes low orders. So steady orders, that's much preferable. That's a comment from commercial sectors. So, and I understand that, military contractors or the government hopes to make the procurement competitive, while too competitive could damage supply chain or could be a hinder to develop well-diversified supply chain. So, long-term strategic decision might be one idea. Allowing for pre-selected suppliers that will be, alleviate some concerns for supply chains, and using those suppliers that could, those type of long-term strategic decision might be helpful for developing supply chain. Yeah, so those are the comments. And again, going back to the original question or the original comment, this is just one example of how Japanese commercial sector can collaborate, can contribute in the global supply chain. So, I hope this will be helpful for our discussions today. Thank you very much.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to give a brief introduction to our company, BAE Systems, then an overview. Okay. An overview of Japan's new defense policy. And then I'll say a bit about the new program, Japan's Next Generation Fighter, that our company is pleased and privileged to participate in with Japan. And finally, a single slide of a few comments that relate to policy, changes to which could result in increased international industrial cooperation to Japan's benefit. So next slide, please. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on our company stuff here. We have 93,000 people around the world in 40 countries. Next slide. BAE Systems is a British company headquartered in the UK, but about 40% of our production capacity is located in the United States in the form of BAE Systems Incorporated. We also have significant production in Australia. We're the largest defense company in Australia, in Sweden, and in Saudi Arabia. Our Saudi operations are large. They're mostly devoted to sustaining the several different aircraft programs that we have there. Next. Now we're going to go into our major business sectors, and these sectors represent the entire company globally. It's not just the UK, it's the global capacity of the company. So GCAP, Global Combat Air Program, that's the acronym, the name that the three countries that are going to participate in this new program, Japan, the UK, and Italy, use to describe it. I'll talk about it a little bit later. Our air sector, and most of this is concentrated in the UK, produces modern fighters. It produces the Typhoon fighter. It has a full complement of aircraft design, aircraft production, aircraft sustainment capability. It can do everything from digital design to advanced computer simulation. It includes our radar offerings for aircraft radar. And it owns about a third of MBDA, the European missile company. Next. Electronic systems, a lot of this resides at our US subsidiary. This includes sophisticated electronic warfare systems. BAE provides the EW system for the F-35. It provides it for the US Air Force's new B-21 bomber. I think we're recognized as a world leader in electronic warfare. It also includes, although we're overwhelmingly a defense company, it includes most of our commercial assets, and this is avionics and electronic systems for commercial airliners. It has all this state-of-the-art design. It provides command and control solutions for the military. And the last one is really almost right now purely a commercial product. It produces a hybrid bus powertrain, kind of like a Toyota Prius, but for a city bus. And those buses are running in a number of cities in the UK and Canada and the United States, not in Japan yet. Next. Then maritime. This again is a business that is concentrated heavily in the UK. We do build almost every ship in the Royal Navy, from the Queen Elizabeth class aircraft carrier to nuclear attack and ballistic submarines, frigates, destroyers. We are by far the largest warship maker in the UK. We also do a lot of ship repair. In the US, BAE Systems Incorporated is one of the largest ship repair companies for the US Navy. Next. Platforms and service. I've always thought this was a bit of an odd name, but this is the name we give to our business, which primarily designs and manufactures combat vehicles for land forces. So we make a number of combat vehicles for the US Army. In fact, we equip the US Army heavy brigades with all of their combat vehicles except tanks. We also build the US Marine Corps' new amphibious vehicle called the Amphibious Combat Vehicle. This last one is perhaps germane to our discussion today. This is our business sector that owns 49% of a joint venture that we have in Turkey called FNSS. I mention this because this is a model that we might apply in Japan in the future, establishing a joint venture with an established Japanese company. Both sides put in capital, both sides contribute technology, and the JV, in this case in Turkey, goes on to actually design and build, in this case, combat vehicles, both for, in this case, Turkey, but also for export to other countries in the world. That's been a very successful JV for this business sector. Next. Okay, this is the last sector slide. In many ways, it's the most important, cyber, because cyber touches everything that a modern military does. Its importance cannot be understated. It's kind of a difficult subject to talk about in a general audience, and I definitely don't have sophisticated technical know-how to talk about it any other way, but it ranges from cyber defense to hardening of systems to protect them from cyber attack. It can include cyber counterattack where necessary. BAE, I believe, is recognized as a world leader in the defense industry community when it comes to cyber. Next. Okay, this just shows where our major locations of people are: US, UK, Saudi Arabia, Australia, international. We hope one day Japan will be its own separate designation there. Next. And this is just a global map showing where our people are located currently. About a third in the US, a little over a third in the UK, and then the rest as you see there. And now we're going to shift focus. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little about Japan's new defense strategy, which was made public last December in the form of 3 documents. And this slide shows the main points of all 3 of those documents. The National Security Strategy is a very high-level document that looks at the threats that are critical to Japan as they are now and as they're projected to be over the next decade. And from that, there's some basic principles that flow from that. One of them is strengthening the US-Japan alliance. Japan only has one ally, and that alliance has been there for a very long time. It's deep, it's robust, it's comprehensive. It has many, many facets for how the 2 countries talk to each other. I'm a retired US diplomat. I lived and breathed this subject for many years. So that pillar of Japan's security is not going away. In fact, it's getting much stronger. In fact, the progress that's being made on transforming that alliance and strengthening it just in the last 4 years is a quicker pace than anything I've ever seen before that. But at the same time, Japan deliberately is encouraging new defense partners, in effect, to supplement that alliance. And I'm very pleased to say that the UK, I think, stands probably at the top of these new defense partners, both in the way that the UK has approached Japan itself, very openly, very interested in deepening ties, and that's been reciprocated by Japan, most recently in the form of Prime Minister Sunak's visit to Tokyo just before the G7 summit in Hiroshima, where He signed a new statement which provides further context, further details on defense and cyber cooperation between Japan and the UK. UK also represents a real node of technology. Both defense and commercial were primarily defense companies, so I'm speaking mainly of defense technology. The UK is one of the world leaders in this area. So I think it's a valuable asset for Japan and is recognized that way. Australia is right alongside the UK, though, in wanting to have closer ties. There are some other European companies that are interested in becoming strong defense partners with Japan, but I think the UK and Australia clearly lead the pack. The second document, the National Defense Strategy, this is how Japan's defense ministry is translating what that security strategy is for areas under its purview. And you can see there, it talks about strategic partnerships, but it starts to get deeper into specific capabilities that the defense ministry needs to acquire. Standoff weapons, which is still somewhat politically controversial in Japan, the idea that Japan should have long-range strike capability to strike an enemy well outside Japan's territorial space, either in retaliation for an attack on Japan or as a preemptive move to stop an attack on Japan before it can occur. This is something that Japan has not seriously contemplated previously. As I said, it's still somewhat politically controversial, but this is part of the plan. And it's a reflection of the way the threat has strengthened against Japan over the last decade. This defense strategy goes further into air and missile systems, including hypersonic. Unmanned runs throughout the defense plan. Cross-domain, this is where different platforms and sensors are linked together. This means that an aircraft flying, for example, is linked to ground sensors, to space sensors, possibly to platforms at sea, so that it operates as part of an integrated whole, part of an environment. Increasingly in modern warfare, whether it's a ship, a plane, a ground vehicle, a satellite in space, these things are not independent platforms. They are part of an integrated whole. And commanders, through links with this whole, can make intelligent decisions about which part of that constellation to use in any given situation, whether it's to watch an enemy or to strike him. That's the concept. A lot of technological work has to be done to fully prove it and make it operational. That's definitely where the United States is going. That's clearly where Japan wants to go. Then finally, the defense buildup plan. This is a feature that the Defense Ministry publishes generally every 5 years, which shows in detail how it's going to spend, how much money it's going to spend on which capabilities. And it gets very, very specific. It'll even say we're going to buy, X number of Type 90 tanks from this company. And so the defense buildup plan for our company and all other defense companies is probably the most interesting document, because then we can really tell where the money is flowing, where the opportunities lie for us. Next slide. This is how the defense budget projection looks. Within 5 years, Japan plans to double its defense budget, to go from 1% of GDP to 2%. The government says that after, at the end of this plan, it intends to at least maintain that 2% level. For those who know the history of Japanese defense spending, for many, many years, holding below 1% of GDP was accepted as a break on Japan's defense spending. And there was no political consensus to go above it. That has been, I think, pretty decisively changed. Again, it's a reflection of the threat that Japan is facing. Next slide. Procurement programs. So this divides major procurement among the 3 self-defense forces. The first one is the Air Self-Defense Force, followed by the Ground Self-Defense Force, followed by the Maritime Self-Defense Force. I don't propose to go into all of these things. I'll simply say that it represents a very, very significant increase in capability for all three of the self-defense forces. In some cases, it's buying more of the same, like F-35s. In some cases, it's building new capabilities that either weren't there before or weren't there in great numbers or in great sophistication. That's certainly true for unmanned systems. Okay, next slide. Here's development programs. This shows the major programs that need a lot of development. In other words, these are not programs you can just buy 10 more of the 2 that you already have. This is where you need to put significant development money in to acquire these capabilities. And again, I don't propose to go into all of them, but again, this is a very healthy, very ambitious, appropriately ambitious, I would say, and also not inexpensive development menu that Japan has drawn up to guide it in its defense buildup. And next slide. This is simply a slide that shows in the 6 months since this new program was announced, what has happened. These are either contracts that have been placed by the Japanese government with specific manufacturers, or there have been announcements of ongoing development, such as hypersonic cruise missile. This just, to me, in the defense industry, this shows that after 6 months, Japan is going into this with a good amount of speed and determination. The documents released last December were not simply a political statement. They were also an action plan, and that plan is being implemented as we speak. Okay, let's hold there for 1 second. Let me just make one editorial comment here. Overall, this defense plan is expensive. It's going to amount to about $330 billion over the next 5 years. It'll put, by the time when this program is finished, if it's fully funded, Japan's going to be in the top 5 defense spenders in the world. Some people project that it could be number 3. I feel safer saying in the top 5. It's definitely going to become a much more capable nation. It's going to have more options available to it if security threats crystallize against it and requires Japan to take action. I think such action would, in effect, always be in concert with its ally, the United States, and it could be in concert with its defense partners. We all hope action isn't necessary because the whole plan is geared towards deterrence. And I think Japan will have a far more credible deterrent capability when this plan is fully implemented than it does now. It's not on any slide, but we're talking about sort of hardware here, but the political framework that allows this to happen has developed steadily over the last 30 years. If you can imagine Japan 30 years ago, even if it had the money, would it have had the political consensus to embark on a modernization program like this? I think the answer clearly is no. Starting with such things as 1991, Prime Minister Kaifu dispatched minesweepers to sweep mines in the Persian Gulf after the first Gulf War. 1992, the Diet approved legislation to allow Japanese troops to go to Cambodia to participate in the first UN peacekeeping operation they'd ever done. I could go on. 1998, Prime Minister Obuchi embraced the idea of Japan joining in collective self-defense. 2002, Japanese ships were dispatched to the Indian Ocean to refuel coalition ships after 9/11. 2005, a Japanese battalion dispatched to Iraq, its first ever deployment to a war zone. 2014, Japan relaxes the so-called 3P restrictions that prevented it from exporting defense articles and really blocked Japan's defense industry from cooperative projects with international industry, except in a few cases with the United States. These things are all sort of touchstones in a long evolution where Japan has steadily built political consensus to have a more credible deterrent capability. And that's where we are now. Okay, next slide. GCAP. Okay, so this is the three-nation future fighter program. This is by far the most highly advanced, I think it will be the most highly consequential weapons development program that Japan has ever done with international countries and industry outside the United States. So the US is not directly involved in this program. You might ask, why is that? Well, what happened was several things came together. Japan and the UK really led this, and both have requirements for a very similar kind of fighter, large twin engine, incorporating future stealth capability, future networking capability. The US doesn't have a program like that at the moment that's available to international cooperation. Probably equally important, this program is going to allow Japan's industry to participate in a very large and meaningful way. It's going to allow exchange of intellectual property. It's going to allow each country that receives these airplanes, Italy is the third partner in this, each country to modify the airplanes as it wants to without necessarily having to get permission from another country, as is often the case with highly technologically advanced US weapons exports. So this really checked the box for Japan in a number of different ways, not only capability, but also supporting Japan's own defense industry and having the intellectual property and other freedoms to modify the airplanes as it wants. Okay, finally, is this it? Yes, this is the final slide. These are just some comments I have. I think that the future of international defense cooperation is going to require the kind of freedoms I think that we're seeing and will see in GCAP. There's been good presentations on using commercial companies, commercial potential to inform the defense space, to add commercially derived technology to the defense space. These are very, very good ideas, good programs. We need to do more of it. I think we also need to recognize that once a technology crosses into the defense sphere, it will inevitably come under more, let's call it, severe controls. It's going to be controlled and regulated by governments in a way that commercial products generally are not. Possible exception might be the nuclear power industry. That's just part of the territory. I think the challenge is to bring in commercial technologies, yes, have them put under regulation, but to change the regulatory regimes themselves. I think the US has more work to do on this than most countries. The US traditionally, particularly in its government-to-government sales scheme called FMS, or Foreign Military Sales, it has approached this with kind of a Cold War attitude, which is the best technology is made in the United States. It's created here, it's made here. It has to be protected from people who might want to penetrate it and learn our secrets. And so the US will do all the producing. And if someone wants to buy it, if we think they're worthy, we'll sell it to them. But their industry cannot participate. I think that model is obsolete. And I think, you know, this has been talked about for over a decade now in the United States. There's clearly congressional interest in the US. There was a hearing 2 months ago that went into this. So I think changes are necessary in the United States for it to give every advantage to itself and to its industries to collaborate internationally on high-tech programs the way that we are going to be doing on GCAP with Japan. Japan has some very specific homework to do. One of Japan's weaknesses, and I think this is broadly acknowledged in Japan, is its own security system, particularly for industry. This means a security classification system where individuals receive a security clearance. It means the way Japanese defense industry approaches security, the kind of internal controls they have on security. It means probably erecting a kind of defense security agency, the way the US has, to provide security clearances, do background checks, inspect companies, and certify that their internal security arrangements are sufficient to deal with the highest levels of technology that they might acquire from other countries. I think Japan is on this road. The new defense plan that it unveiled last December specifically calls for Japan to improve security in this area. Number two, ITAR and AUKUS. ITAR, for those who don't know it, International Trafficking in Arms Regulations. That's the official US government name for all the rules and regulations that govern defense exports from the United States to other countries. And ITAR around the world has a less than sterling image. Sure, if you want the latest US technology, you got to put up with the ITAR rules and regulations. But a lot of countries, particularly in Europe, do their best to design systems with no ITAR because they don't want to be bound by these rules, many of which are onerous and all of which really put the US in a position to indirectly control projects that have ITAR technology in them. AUKUS, the Australia, UK, US trio that was formed not long ago, which is going to supply nuclear submarines to Australia, and is also going to work on advanced technology, defense technology for those three countries. This may be a test bed where ITAR is, I won't say suspended, but it is provided to the three countries to work on their cooperative projects without having to get a US government license at every stage of the collaboration. Kind of a closed house. You put some ITAR in there, the three partners can circulate it, work on it, exchange it, because they're all trusted. I know that Japan would like to become associated formally with AUKUS down the road. I think and hope that will happen at some point. So it might become JAUKUS. If so, if these ITAR arrangements function the way many are saying they probably will, this would be an excellent opportunity for defense cooperation using some of the latest US technology. And then finally, initiatives to enable openings by startups, entrepreneurs, and non-traditional defense enterprises. The House Foreign Affairs Committee had a hearing on April 18th. You can watch it on YouTube, where this is one of the subjects discussed. The Pentagon 5 years ago recognized that a lot of commercial enterprises in the United States, particularly in Silicon Valley, had interesting technology that could be applied to defense programs. So they set up an office in Silicon Valley in California. I think this is only going to grow. I represent a large defense company. We're not terribly welcoming to new competitors, but we are very welcoming to new partners that have high technology capabilities. If this track can produce new, better partners, not saying anything about our current ones, but there's so much talent, so many ideas in the commercial startup space in the United States. If that can produce some of those companies that are interested in entering the defense space, we and other large defense companies will benefit from that. So will the taxpayer and so will our countries. I hope that Japan will do more to encourage that kind of activity in its own commercial sector, particularly among small and medium-sized enterprises and startups. I think for most Japanese small companies, the idea of entering the defense space just isn't on the horizon. And probably many of them would even object. They would say, I don't want our product being used for a defense purpose. I think it's a long evolution to change that mindset. I know that METI is trying to do that. But in Japan, so many businesses here that have such interesting technology are small enterprises. that I hope that this track can get some fuel going forward to strengthen it. Anyway, that's my presentation. Thank you.
The discussant is Professor Motohiro Tsuchiya, my old friend, the leading starter of cyber. And that's everybody says that's actually, I was told by at least 3 times by US officials that when I said that I know Professor Tsuchiya, he's my friend. And then, oh, do you know what? He's a leading starter of cyber. So a very world-known cybersecurity startup, but more importantly, a very good friend of mine. Please join me for welcoming Dr. Tsuchiya.
So thank you, Takeuchi-san. So again, welcome to Keio University. So it is my great honor to have distinguished guests from Lone Star State, where I had a wonderful time right before the pandemic. I enjoyed Rangers baseball game actually, and so with Ambassador Ryozo Kato. So I recognize that time in Texas is approaching 3 a.m. Oh, thank you for keeping your eyes open. And as Takeuchi-san says, the sun is Japan's symbol and star is Texas' symbol. So what is Keio's symbol? This is it. So you can see it here. So this is a crossing of 2 pens. So we say the pen is mightier than sword. So I think you recognize our founder, Yukichi Fukuzawa. So he is printed on 10,000 yen bill. This is our founder. So he was born to a samurai family. So he was wearing a sword. But after the Meiji Restoration, so he gave up his sword and he became a scholar. So he was using a pen to change the Japanese situation. So in the uncertain world, so especially when I looking at the war in Ukraine, so I have been thinking about this motto. Is the pen really mightier than sword? So it's a difficult question these days. And technology is connecting the pen and sword. I don't want to expand battlefields. I want to stop the war in Ukraine and other conflicts in the world. But what kind of role technology can play? What kind of role technology companies can play in this uncertain world? So that's a topic of the panel 3. So by the way, please look at the stained glass on the both sides of this room. So they say festina lente. It's a Latin word. I don't understand it, but I heard that they meaning slowly hurry up. It's a confusing words actually, but I have just 5 minutes left for our discussion. So I have to be very simple and quick. So I have one quick question to all the panelists. So the question is, what really hinders Japan's R&D and innovation in defense industries? So you laid out a lot of factors and recommendation to the audience, but I want a very quick, simple answer from you. So for your convenience, I have 3 options for you. 1, money. So defense budget will be double quite soon, I hope. We will have more money. So it will change our R&D and innovation in the future. Second, pacifist mindset. So we lost the war and we have very unique constitution. The constitution is restricting our policy, but it might change in the future because a war might come to East Asia. I don't want it, but it might come. So pacifist mindset is restricting us, but it will change our future. The third option is guts to move things forward. So Japan is a bureaucratic country, so our governance system is very stubborn. So maybe too stubborn. So no one wants to change the system. I have three options, only three options. You can choose one. If you really, really disagree with me, you can raise number 4 or number 5. But please, so Kuro-san, which is the biggest factor?
Sensei, very great question. And thank you again for being the discussant for this panel. And thank you to my colleagues for joining on this. I think it raises a lot of interesting questions. And solving this, I want to emphasize, as I get to your question, what I was thinking as you were emphasizing the pen being mightier than the sword. When I think about R&D and innovation, I think about both solutions to address challenges such as defense and deterrence, but also solutions to achieve opportunities. And so when we think about space, or we think about energy needs, clean energy, we think about more productive future economy, those are the kinds of things that the sort of pen in your body, I think, are the fruits of R&D and innovation besides security, or based on security. So they go hand in hand, but I see the positive, if you will, as well as the insurance basis of sort of defense. To your 3 option framing, I'll pick 3B. So it relates to the pen and the sword in a sense, because I think that I would not maybe agree that Japan has an innovation challenge or an innovation difficulty. I think that what I see is some limitations on innovation in the defense sector, and in some areas where I see in many other areas incredible innovation, where it is in areas that there is where the processes and the systems are in place to do that, whether it's consumer electronics or other areas, automotive, and all of these that we've seen. And so much in the sciences. So I would say that it's not just a bureaucratic or bureaucratism in general, but it is about the barriers that are particularly around the defense economy and some of the things that I think Tom sort of got at. And I think Amaki-san also looking at ways to cut across that with investment and to sort of break down some of those barriers. So 3B.
Much. So Amaki-san, so I know you are a banker, so you're not a military guy actually, and so DBJ is not involved in the military things directly, but I really want to know your choice.
Yeah, so it's applicable to all industries, not only in military. And I think the answer might be number 4. So best match between good mindsets and money. So in Japan, mindsets, we have some companies, some good players who have good minds. So for instance, iSpace is the first IPO company in the space industry in Japan. I met with staff in iSpace, and the CFO explained to me how the daily operations goes are totally different from conventional styles, for instance, JAXA or heavy industry companies, totally different. So even great talents from those established companies are sometimes struggling to catch up with a different style. But with that different style, they can make up new things. So styles, daily operations, how we can make innovations, that would require different mindsets. That might be one factor. While still those players needs money. So IPO, that's great. While still, for instance, iSpace has a long, big ambitions. I hope I'm pretty optimistic about long-term growth. While still, resources to realize those development would be required. So, and Japanese industry, like us, banks has financial resources, my mission is to allocate those financial resources to the best mindset players. That's my role. So I think that the best matching might be one idea.
So, Mr. Like, so I understand that you stationed in Japan for a long time as a diplomat, so you know the Japanese society. So I really want to know.
I only know what I know. I don't claim to know all Japanese society.
So, what is your choice?
Well, I agree with everything that these two gentlemen said. I'm going to add something. So, you know, there's nothing like a BAE or a Lockheed Martin or a Raytheon in Japan. All Japanese defense companies, even the biggest one, MHI, are small parts of much larger commercial companies. So I think that they really lose in terms of mass in being able to make their own decisions about where to put R&D money. Because all too often, the defense parts of these companies wait until they get an order from the government, and then they'll make it. You know, they'll put the money into R&D for that. They know the government wants to get that thing, so they'll do that. But when it comes to adding new R&D money to pioneer a technology or a system that the government hasn't even shown great interest in yet to prepare for the future, well, the CEO of the huge company, he has to weigh that against, you know, putting the same money into making the newest washing machine or a hydrogen powered car or something else. And all too often with defense contracts having such a low margin, the CEO is going to say, I can get 3 times the profit by putting it into a commercial product. So I think there has to be consolidation in Japan's defense industry. There are too many companies, too many mid-level companies for one thing. And if it was possible to create a BAE of Japan, for example, I think that would further defense technology investment in Japan just by doing that.
Thank you very much. Takeuchi-san, can I extend a few minutes? Okay, so because we have a special guest, Mr. Watanabe is here. So he is a first commissioner of Acquisition Technology and the Logistic Agency under the Ministry of Defense. So I want to ask the same question to you. So what is your choice between the 3 choices?
Yeah, for me, it's a very surprise, Tsuchiya Sensei. So I'm not sure, but so and I think so from my viewpoint, so in March, this March, I learned a lot from the U.S. Undersecretary of Defense, Ms. Heidi Shyu. She said that now ATRA is setting up Japan version DARPA or DIU, as they are working hard to establish these organization, new organization, very new. But so I think from Heidi Shyu point of view, and she said that to overcome this worry of the, so I think maybe for the useful equipment, so they need so private funding. So as Mr. Sankro said, they now introduce private funding, but so the private funding is sometimes very different, but not short term, very long term. And she said that the patient capital. So so the name is Office of Strategic Capital. OSC is a very new organization. So Ms. Heidi Shyu set up last year, December last year. So they're very new. But she said that this is upper grade of the maybe upper position. So the the highest position in office of so her agency. Yeah. Therefore, maybe so we need another solution. So they maybe private funding is very new. So I think a new idea. And therefore, I would like to propose a Japan version of OSC to solve this. So I think maybe desperately. Yeah, maybe it is necessary. But in that case, maybe maybe bank is very important. So therefore, I think this is a very good opportunity, and I'm grateful for inviting me to this very good occasion. Thank you very much.
Abe-san. So our time is almost up, but if you have burning question, burning comment to presenters, so just let me know. Yes, please.
Thank you very much indeed. Susan Oliver from Defence Council for Security, Space, Cyber and Defence. I think I said that already. British Embassy. I have sat here all day and I've been taking numerous notes, and so I'm going to try to put them all together. But a couple of observations. Stan, you mentioned doing partnerships with a pilot scheme and very small bite size. The UK went big early, did we not, with our GCAP programme? And also somebody mentioned about the fact that the UK has left the EU. Well, that's why we have Italy as one of our other partners. We haven't left the Europe at all. However, my question is, I think early on in the day, we were saying about getting Japan or Japanese public ready in case there is some kind of conflict in Taiwan. I wonder how we can get the Japanese ready, or the public ready, to export some of the cooperation they do in the defence and security industry, with sort of highlighting the economic benefits and the supply chain security, and in growing their industrial base, creating more skilled jobs, bringing skilled wages to their employees. And I just wonder, it's probably to Amaki-san, how do we get the Japanese public in the mindset of cooperation and then exporting to be able to realize all of those benefits? Thank you.
Okay, so is there any other question, comment? No more? So in that case, so I will give each of you 30 seconds to for final remarks and respond to her question. So for Amaki-san, but so maybe the opposite order, so Mr. Like.
How to get the public ready? Look, I think if Japan approaches this by first exporting parts and components that aren't visibly Japanese, that go inside of their platforms, I don't think this is going to present a significant political issue for Japan. And I think that's how things are going to go for a very long time. There'll be the occasional newspaper article and photograph, some weapon or something crashes or blows up or is fired at an enemy, and in the wreckage there's a Japanese circuit board. Oh my God. But that's already happened. I think that the public essentially accepts and understands that this is the way forward, that arms exports is just part and parcel of defense technology cooperation. We're not at the stage where a finished Japanese system like a warship or an airplane is going to be sold to a country that's then going to take it into combat. I don't think we're there yet. But I think this is going to happen over time. It's going to be an evolution. And I think for quite a while, it won't even be much in the public eye. That's sort of how my guess is.
Thank you, Amaki-san.
Yeah. Hard question. So to be honest, yeah, exporting military products would be a big jump. So for instance, just before our panel, Mr. Tom Rai asked me, hey, Daxon, do you know ODA would include military products exports, and can DBJ finance for that? And I answered, that I don't think, currently, usual Japanese commercial players can finance for that. We are not yet ready for that. even developing national capabilities to increase preventative functions. That has been a long history to make a public discussion. And many people are concerned that exporting might inevitably increase the tensions between the in the regions. Why do we need to be involved in that current tension? We, even increasing our own capabilities, that's a huge challenge. Why, do we step up into the next step? So I think at the moment, not as a banker, as a, one common citizen, I'm not ready for that. That's my answer.
Hey, Kuro-san, so you are the mastermind of this panel. So did you get what you want?
That's a lot of responsibility. So I don't know the answer to that. But I think that what we're talking about is a vision of the future that is a more integrated partnership, that is a more multidimensional partnership, and multi-directional partnership. And so, we started off US-Japan, it's in the title. We sort of snuck into British here. So thanks for letting us do that. I think that's important. And Mexico and the discussions with trade are getting at that sort of, additional dimensionality. And as we start really talking about what full partnership in this kind of a network means, there'll be natural implications of that. And how far that goes towards defense exports, don't know, but partnership in major efforts around space exploration, around maybe nuclear energy, maybe other kinds of clean energy, maybe kinds of things that do contribute to defense as well, cyber and so forth, inherently are going to cross old boundaries. And I think that that's just part of growing beyond the old boundaries mentally. That's part of my 3B answer before, but that as we start to just envision what that fully cooperative network looks like, then maybe just the question of defense exports will tend to sort of recede.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is a wonderful panel. I learned a lot from the panelists. Please join me to thank the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for panel 3. It seems that according to the program, the last speaker is myself. And I'm giving the closing remarks. So I don't want to be an obstacle of your plan for the Saturday evening. So, but first of all, thank you very much for all of you who participated in this symposium. Also, thank you all staff members of the SMU Tower Center and as well as Keio University's Global Research Institute. This symposium originally was organized as I said yesterday for May 2020. And of course, that was canceled. And then, so we were trying to organize this year. So the pamphlet on the page 3, I started with saying that Japan imposed a strict border closure that banned foreigners from entering the country for 3 months on November 30th, 2021. You may remember at that time, world was opening, and then we were expecting that Japan would follow. But Japan made an opposite decision. And then in 2022, while many of the countries are resumed a lot of the operations. Japan delayed the resuming the operation. And one of that kind of activities was the SME in Japan program, which actually we are conducting from next week. We were trying to resume the SME in Japan program at the Kansai Gakuin University that year. And then we had to cancel the program. We had a lot of excellent students who were ready to go to Japan at that time, last summer. And then the Japan program was canceled. So we decided to bring our students to Oxford program, and that was a very good second option. And then I really enjoyed, and I believe that my students also enjoyed a lot. So, I moved my own class, which I usually teach in Japan at Kansai Gakuin University to Oxford. And then interestingly, I was teaching international relations of East Asia in United Kingdom. Well, that was an interesting experience, but at the same time, it was a timely topic in international relations and a timely location, interestingly. The reason is I usually start the class with saying, mentioning about a certain puzzle. That is, well, this is a little bit pessimistic perspective, but so in Europe, there are a lot of the institutional mechanism for security. So there is a NATO and other regional security mechanism. Asia, there is no institutional mechanism, and basically it is based on hub and spoke security reliance system by hub and spoke by the United States, as well as various ad hoc security mechanism. So before that time, before 2022, I would say if there was before 2022, I was saying that well, if there is a next war, then that war would occur in Asia. And then there was a good reason. There are a few candidates, like the Taiwan Straits are very unstable, Korean Peninsula, and then also two largest countries in the region, China and Japan, they are in conflict with each other for various reasons, right? So all of us thought that the next war would happen in Asia, and then next war actually happened in Europe. That was the time, like February 2022. And so that's why I thought that last year I found it very interesting that I had to teach international relations of East Asia in Europe. That time I brought two students who were the students I brought to Oxford include the two students who just graduated, who came to our program, came to here, Savni Desai here, and also Kiri McNamee. And then on page 10, there was the papers that they have published in the peer-reviewed academic journal I co-authored. And then you can read them, you can download them from the QR codes shown on page 10. As you know, it's very difficult and very rare for undergraduate students to make a publication. I was delighted that we had an opportunity to bring them to Oxford because that was their third summer. And then you may know that every undergraduate student, college student, they only have 3 summers. And then they are the class, they are the generation that all the opportunities to go to Japan were canceled because of the pandemic. I would like to conclude this symposium with a story of 3 notable dates. And the first date is a very familiar date, September 11th, 2001. And then you don't, well, I don't think I need to mention what it means. But another thing that I'd like you to keep in mind is that 2001 is the year that we started recognizing China's rise was real. So before that, yes, China is achieving the remarkable economic growth. Is it sustainable? How long does it take? Well, China, since 2001, it is evident that China has become has been becoming, at least, a superpower. It is probably challenging the United States. And the second date is that I pushed to a very recent date. That is February 24th, 2023. I'm sorry, 2022. So this is a day that Russia invaded Ukraine. And you may remember what was the tone of the discussion before that. Well, many people say, well, Russia was rational enough not to invade Ukraine. But February 24th, it was evident that Russia invaded Ukraine. Then we have been living in the world with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. A third date I mentioned is actually now a future date. And then fortunately it didn't happen, or it didn't matter, and then nobody will remember because it doesn't matter in the end. That is June 5th, 2023. That is the day that Secretary Yellen, Treasury Secretary of the United States, said U.S. may have to declare default if a debt ceiling negotiation is not agreed. I decided not to choose January 6, 2021. The reason I mention is at one point last month when G7 summit meetings took place, there was a report that President Biden was considering to cancel the visit to Hiroshima to visit for a G7 summit meeting. I was wondering, what does it mean? Well, to me, comparing debt ceiling and then that negotiation versus G7 summit meeting, which really is important for a regional security framework. Which one is more important? And then is there anything that you should consider? That reflects the current state of American domestic politics. That is a topic throughout this symposium, starting with Ambassador Schiffer's keynote speech yesterday. As you all know, I'm a China specialist, so I'd like to I usually look at U.S.-Japan relations with the lens of looking at China. And also another way of looking at international relations is, for me, is domestic politics matters. So I'd like to conclude with briefly mentioning about how those 3 dates affect the domestic politics of the 3 countries, China, Japan, and the United States. Of course, this is a conference on U.S.-Japan relations. So China is not on the title, but actually every time I attend a conference on the U.S.-Japan relations, almost the second word is China. So, so everybody talks about China, whatever bilateral relations you talk about. So China's domestic politics, which actually not necessarily many people pay attention to. I usually compare it to the iceberg. And there is an expression called tip of iceberg. Right? So tip of iceberg means that usually at 9% of what you see as iceberg below, above the surface is just 9% of the iceberg. That's physics, not politics. So we often talk about the US-China trade war, etc. The impact of the US-China friction on China's domestic economy is just the tip of the iceberg, about 9% maybe. Fundamental part is their stagnation of the state-owned enterprise reform. Under Xi Jinping, we expected him to be committed to reform because he knew that China had developed because of the economic reform. And we are sure that he knew that, but at the same time, he decided not to commit to reform. Another factor is the aging society. So that's actually the fundamental part. And then the largest part of the iceberg of the China's economic problem and hence the political problem is the stagnation of the state-owned enterprise reform. What is Japan's problem? I'd say Japan's problem is a fiscal debt. So you might think like, well, US has a large fiscal debt. US doesn't have a fiscal debt problem because everybody everybody appreciates the value of dollar. If the dollar's value that goes down, then that everybody suffer from it. So, but Japanese yen does not enjoy that status. So Japan's fiscal debt will be a problem in the near future. That's what I'm concerned with. There is a good news. If one problem is solved, most of the Japanese economic problems will be solved. What is it? That is population. If Japanese population increases, then all of the problems, almost all of the economic problems will be solved. By the way, this is not my original comment. That's actually Morgan Stanley's president the other day came to Japan and then he said that. And I agree. So what will increase the population in population? Well, more foreigners. So whether Japan can make that decision and then can make institutional reforms in a way to promote like more foreigners coming to Japan, both like short-term and long-term, then like the Japanese economy will recover. And then of course I know it's easy to say, hard to do. And then like here is my colleague Jim Holyfield is the leading scholar of immigration. So it's not straightforward, but actually you can simplify Japan's problem into one factor, like Tsuchiya Sensei, the other said choose one. So I said I would choose that population. Finally, US problem. I would say, well, I know that we said you might say that a lot of problems, yes, but well, every country has one. So, but I would like to choose one. That is a poorly informed public, I would say. This is actually also not I said for the first time, and then this is not like what is said recently. In 2011 Foreign Affairs article, Zbigniew Brzezinski said United States is the most poorly informed public among the world's democracies. So, which I would agree. And then also United States is the only country where a majority of the people get the news only from social media. Yes, and Fox is not included in social media. So, so that's actually a U.S. problem, I think, and it's a huge obstacle for U.S. democracy to work. That's so U.S., China, Japan, U.S. Those three largest economies in the United States in the world have those big issues in the in their domestic politics, and the world will be very, in a sense, unstable. And then Jason's comments at the beginning of this symposium, that is, well, of course, uncertainty, but world is always uncertain, isn't it? Well, yes. Maybe I would say world is now more unpredictably uncertain. I would like to conclude with pointing out kind of two divisions that makes it more difficult to solve these problems. One is an urban-rural divisions. Many of the issues actually could be explained with urban-rural division, especially like Ambassador Schiffer mentioned in the keynote speech, those who benefit, who can enjoy the benefit from the new trend, especially the new trend of globalization, automation, and digitalization versus those who do not. And then that is actually, those people are located roughly saying like an urban areas versus rural areas. And those who are familiar with American politics, and then like, those who heard about American politics news, we often say like, Texas is something like this and California is something like that. And then I'd often say that Texas politics is very much Republican, conservative, while California is liberal. Well, if you go to rural areas in California, it's very conservative and Republican, and then very similar to like Texas rural areas. In the meantime, if you compare Dallas and Los Angeles, the difference is very small. So in that sense, an urban-rural division is very much determines many of the issues. Another is actually generational division. And this is actually very serious. There are a few, President Biden in his inauguration speech points out 4 issues, biggest issues at that time in 2020. So one is the climate change. Another is economic growth after pandemic. So that at that time, the issue is economic growth, not the inflation yet. And then third is economic inequality. And then fourth, health, of course, right? So that is after pandemic. Well, to solve these problems, younger generation has to solve those problems. And then like good news is younger generation like correctly realize those problems. Whether they can solve the problem or not, we are not sure. However, younger people are more interested in climate change issue. Younger people are more supportive for more immigration, and then more supportive for mobility of the people. And then at the same time, younger people are fit to digitalization, new technology. So I do not have an immediate answer to those questions, immediate answer to those questions that the world has. But the one thing I say is, as I have been teaching in the university, I have a lot of hopes for younger generation, and I'm sure that they have more tools, and then they have more wisdom to solve those problems. What we should do, let me say 2 things. We cannot be younger, so nobody can be younger. So 2 things I say. One is I think that throughout today's symposium, I was kind of struck with the idea that multiple people said that businesses are important positively. So starting with Jason's commercial diplomacy, and businesses, like firms have a more realistic solution than the politicians, et cetera, et cetera. Internationally competitive business is important. Here point is internationally competitive, that part. So if the business is not internationally competitive, but relies on protectionism and government subsidies for their competitiveness, then they are not helpful to achieve security and stability in the world. Or moreover, my friend and then colleague in the UT Austin, Patrick McDonald says, so internationally competitive business will bring peace. here, so again, like I emphasize internationally competitive business. And I would say, sorry for political, but former president of the United States who claimed he is a businessman is not, his business is not internationally competitive. So, so that's why it's not so helpful to achieve peace. But at the same time, the other side of the politics, like left tends to blame the business unfairly because they actually put business in the one category and then just they point out the problems. So it's very important to figure out what is internationally competitive business and then how to make a policy making for internationally competitive business to do their job in a good way. The secondly, well-informed public is very important. And then I'm actually, I'm really proud of being in the education sector and then in the college, in the university. But at the same time, we need to keep the effort of, we should inform ourselves in the right way. And so those two things are important to solve almost every international relations problem through various domestic political problems. Well, I'm so glad to be back to Keio University. I'm so glad to start. I'm so glad to do the. I was so glad to have done this symposium in person. This is the first in-person Samstar symposium in Japan. Thank you very much for Keio University for hosting this symposium, or the staff members of both Keio and SMU. But at the end, toward the end, I'd like to acknowledge four interpreters today. Ms. Sayata Takeda, Ichiro Tatsuki, Mariko Nagai, and Tatae Akiyama. Please join me for applause.